Hey team, we're super excited today to have with us Sarah Merschrow, who is my partner in the webinar series that we run in projectmanagement.com, where we bring experts in the field of transformation and change management. And Sarah has been doing a phenomenally good job over the last over a year now, bringing and consistently executing these webinars, working with experts. So I want to pick your brain, Sarah, so that we can all learn from you and viewers can benefit from this from two perspectives. People that are wanting to present, they understand how your process works, and folks that are desirous of having a content-based webinar series can learn from you as to how they can consistently, flawlessly execute these webinars. So Sarah, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
So first of all, where are you today?
So today I'm lucky enough to be in Marseille, France. I'm in the south of France, and it is perpetually beautiful here. It's always sunny in the south of France, and yeah, I've been here for a few months, and I've been avoiding winter. So
Tell us a little bit about yourself. You're in France. Your accent is a little bit too heavy for French people. What's going on?
So I'm Canadian and so born and raised in Canada from Montreal, and spent a number of years in Toronto. And then one day I just decided I didn't want to do another winter in Canada. They're rather harsh and cold. And so I decided to come to one of the most beautiful places in the world. And so I just picked a spot on the map, and so this is my second winter actually here in Marseille in the south of France. And so I've been touring around, and yeah, I've been very, very fortunate to be able to do that.
Lucky you. Well, I've been in the cold weather most of my life here, so I certainly think you're in a very good position, enjoying nice weather over the winter months, and I'm sure you're enjoying the great culture in France too.
Yeah, no, I love it here. It's also given me a great opportunity to get my French back. So did speak French when I was younger, of course, not so much as I was a teenager, and then coming back to France, or coming to France into the French, it was a little bit more a change than I think I expected, but it has been a really great opportunity to get my French back. And so nicely bilingual once again. So
Awesome.
hmm.
And so you're very global, and that's one of the things when I talk to some speakers, I explain to them how global our audience is, and you are very representative of our global nature. You actually live in two continents most years nowadays, it looks like. Uh, Once I find a speaker that's interested and potentially is a match for our webinar series, I normally introduce them to you. What happens after that?
So once we get the email from you, and we do have a third colleague who is in Germany as well. So she and I work in the same time zone, and so we then set up a meeting with our speaker. We send them a checklist, and so then Louisa and I will go through set up a meeting and set up a time to go through this checklist with the speaker. We generally do set up our webinars about 4 months in advance. So we do need to, first things first, set up a date that the speaker will present to our membership. And so the webinars do happen at about 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the first Wednesday of every month. And then we will have a practice session on the Monday prior to that at the same time, so 2 p.m. Eastern. So that is a little bit flexible. depending on where the speaker is. So we just had a speaker who was based in Japan. So I think 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time is about 4 o'clock in the morning for him. And so we did move everything to about 4 p.m. So it could be 6 a.m. for him. But we do try to keep everything consistent. So at about 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. So first things first, we do need to set a date, and that's what that initial meeting is for. Speakers do have a checklist. So we share a file, and within that file is this checklist. So there are 7 items in total in the checklist. The first 5 items are things that we absolutely need to be able to schedule this the webinar within PMI's system. And so once the date's taken care of, we need the speaker agreement. A speaker agreement, we have the biography, a username, the title of the webinar, and abstract of the webinar. So within the speaker agreement, there's a whole bunch of legalese. One of the most important parts is that the content of the webinar does need to go onto PMI's template. However, the speaker does still own the content of that webinar. It's just that once it's on PMI's template, that's the part that becomes the property of PMI. So that's the part that goes on projectmanagement.com. That's the part that PMI protects for distribution purposes. But the actual content that the speaker owns, that the speaker placed on the PMI template, they still own that content. So if the speaker then wants to record their own webinar and distribute it on YouTube, they can go ahead and do that, and that's completely fine. The second item that we need is a short biography from the speaker, and so that's essentially the speaker being able to sell themselves. Just 5 to 10 sentences of whatever the speaker feels is most important to them. And we need the speaker to register on projectmanagement.com, so we need their username. Projectmanagement.com is it's a membership-based site, and so essentially for our membership to be able to communicate with the speaker, they need to be able to find you. We need to be able to set up a profile, and we need to be able to attach that webinar to your profile. So it's a free membership, but we do need you to be able to go on and register. We do need the title of your webinar as well. To be able to set everything up in the system, and we need to be able to know what you're talking about. I do have a list of previous titles that that speakers have delivered in the past. So if you are looking for a title, you want to get creative, but you don't really want to present something that's already been presented, we can definitely support you in that and provide you with some titles that have been given before if you really want to go kind of outside the box. And just following in that vein, we also need to know a short abstract of your webinar, of what you're talking about. So 5 to 10 sentences of what your webinar, the content is going to be, and that is to help us to promote you to be able to put it up on the site, and then to be able to communicate to our membership what the webinar is going to be about. So those are the 5 items that we really need once we have your date to be able to create the webinar in the system in PMI. So once those are all set up, we do need 2 more items. There are 7 items in total on this checklist. So the one, and these 2 items we really only need in general before the webinar. So one is your slides in PMI template. And these dates are flexible. We don't really need these items right away. Sometimes we need them just before your webinar itself. Some speakers kind of want a little bit more support in creating their slides, but essentially we just need the slides before you present. And then the last item is kind of an optional item, and it's an article to promote your webinar, and it's to be shared on projectmanagement.com. And so that we do get up about a month before your webinar. And so depending on how early we schedule your webinar, or we get all the other items of the list in, that will depend on when you're able to kind of get your your article in so that we can get it through the editing process and things like that. So those are the two other items that are a little bit more flexible.
Great. You've done a super job of breaking it down into step-by-step process, both for the speakers and presenters and for the people that want to learn how to do it. In terms of the content of the webinar itself, a lot of our speakers come from different backgrounds and they have their own audience and products and services. Are there certain guidelines you use in terms of what can actually come into a webinar if there is some kind of a pitch that the presenter wants to make?
We just encourage our presenters not to be overly selly. This isn't really a sales-based platform, so we really encourage our presenters to their best tool is informational. So we encourage them really to provide information to the group. We do have about 2,500 people who show up at each one of our webinars, and each one of these people, each one of our members really come to learn something. And a lot of people do present webinars because they are independent contractors. They're doing it on a volunteer basis. That being said, really being there to sell something, sell their new book is really not the reason that the audience comes to see it. It's an information session, and so people want to learn, they want to grow in their careers, and that's really how we encourage presenters to best sell themselves, is to really provide themselves and open themselves up as a resource to the membership, and not necessarily be on the sell side of things.
So what would be considered okay? For example, is it okay for them to have in one of the slides or along the presentation their websites, their contact information? What's considered okay?
Yeah, so every presenter is encouraged to really introduce themselves, to have a slide where they have a bio, have their contact information. It can either come at the beginning or at the end. Spread it out, do a little bit of both. Usually presenters, have a slide at the end, once they've given their talk, and then at the end they say, this is, if you want to know information, please contact me. And then, if they do have a book or a website, a blog, something like that, you can have a one-liner at the bottom saying, check out my blog, for more information on this topic. That is completely acceptable. To give you an example of what we wouldn't share with our membership would be if a slide deck came in and there were big stars all over it. Every third slide it was, buy my new book. This is on page 5 of my new book, and that we would really work with a speaker to change that content a lot.
Sure. Sometimes I know you're booked months ahead of time, but the process that you just described, how much time do you think it typically takes from your experience? Now you have worked with several speakers over time, that it takes for the whole thing to come together. At the least, how long do you think it takes? From the time you're introduced to a speaker, you're starting brand new, to the time the webinar gets presented, is it typically, does a month suffice normally? Because most of the people already have some form of the content with them, and they're repackaging it for the purposes of our webinar. What would you recommend is the minimum amount of time that we should have?
Yeah, I think absolute minimum, I think we've put speakers together in a month. Definitely the most time consuming part is actually putting together the content. And so if a speaker already has their content, many people have a biography. Getting people up on projectmanagement.com takes 5 minutes. It's so really these steps, feels like there are many. There are 5. So there are a few steps, but they really don't take very long. I want to say it would probably take grand total of an hour to get through the steps if you have all of your content prepared. And so and that's including touching base. So so we've definitely prepared speakers in a month to present the following month. Mm-hmm.
And normally, do you do some calls with the speaker where you talk to them over this duration, over a month? How many interactions normally does it take?
We normally only do one call, but it depends on what kind of support a speaker wants. So some speakers want to speak several times, and then I'll talk to a speaker as many times as they need for them to feel comfortable, for sure. Some speakers don't want to talk at all. They just submit everything, and then I send it on to projectmanagement.com, and then we do our practice session and everything runs along. So it really depends on the individual. We are here as a team to support our speakers to deliver the best content that we can. And so different people have different communication needs from that perspective. And so this process is kind of set up to meet everybody in the middle, so nobody feels really abandoned. But that being said, some speakers want to talk 3-4 times, and other speakers don't feel that it's necessary. So
what about the technology side? We get speakers that some of them are savvy, some of them maybe not that much. How does it all come together that it really comes across and gets delivered very well every time?
Well, that, thank goodness, is out of my hands. We have really great support from PMI. So we have Stephen and Derek from PMI who are taking care of the technological side of things. We have the platform that we're using from PMI, and so we essentially just let them deal with the nitty-gritty. And so that's why we do have the practice session. Because I think even with some of the most technologically savvy people, people who do webinars all the time, sometimes when you work with a new platform or, even with the same old platform, but suddenly you're doing it at a distance, anything and everything can happen. The sound doesn't work. It's quiet for some reason. Page 4 is missing. Why is page 4 missing? And without that practice session, even taking 15 minutes to do it is so important, because then 2 days later, you're 100% more confident. You know where all the buttons are. You can expect, what to expect with the Q&A message board, where to post your regular messages, and everything just runs so much more smoothly. So yeah, but from a technological standpoint, we're all really happy we're not directly relying on me.
Good, and it works out very well. The article side of it, can you elaborate that a little bit more on that? How does that work with respect to the webinar? Is it the content of the webinar, or maybe just explain a little bit more what the expectation is and what's the benefit to both the audience, the bigger community, and to the speaker from the article? How does it work?
Sure. So, because projectmanagement.com is a subscription-based platform, most of the content is only available to PMI members and people who have paid for a subscription to projectmanagement.com. And so, as a speaker, once your webinar is posted on projectmanagement.com, if you try to promote that webinar, let's say on your LinkedIn, and somebody who is not a member of projectmanagement.com goes on to projectmanagement.com and tries to look at your webinar, tries to view it, they'll only be able to see the first minute of it. And I believe they also won't have access to the comments. So they will have very, very limited access to it. And that's not to your greatest advantage. Um, However, with the article, that's open access. That's free access, and so essentially, anybody from outside anywhere will be able to click on that article, read it, comment on it, and you'll be able to promote it. And then those people outside will be able to also get the opportunity to sign up for a membership to projectmanagement.com and view the entire webinar. So that's the advantage of having the article. The article also comes out earlier, so you can use it as a promotional vehicle to get people to sign up for your webinar, because it is open and available to everybody. As for the content of that article, it's really up to the speaker. Whatever you feel like putting in the article, it's really up to you. That being said, some suggestions that we do make is that if you put the entire content of your webinar, just duplicate it into that article, it might really affect the usefulness of the webinar. So what we suggest is that you know, as far as content goes, just kind of pick a point, jump off of it, so that the article is a complementary feature to the webinar, and so you're not just duplicating. But it is your article, and so you can really do what you like with it. And so often there are articles that we do post on projectmanagement.com that do get placed on PMI.org, so the actual PMI site for other projects that are being done there. And so so there is that opportunity to get kind of the cross featuring. So so there is a lot of motivation to really write a good article with some quality content.
Great. Now, I know on the day of the webinar itself, it's an exciting day for the presenter. They have a wide global audience. It's exciting for the audience because they're going to get PDUs out of it. They're going to learn new material they can use. How does it work, that 90 minutes? How does that flow?
Well, it's really exciting for us too, because we get to hang out and talk to each other and see our audience.
Yeah, very much so.
So 90 minutes. So we get to, I guess we log in a little bit early. What is it? It's only a few minutes, right? It's 5 minutes or so. And we've logged in, I guess, 15 minutes or so early, so we'll make sure that all of the buttons are still functioning. We can hear each other. The slides have uploaded. So that's just for the core team and the speaker, and of course our tech from PMI. And so we make sure all of that is working. And then once we verify all of that, we usually have about 5 minutes or so to take a little breather, and then the doors open and people start flooding in. And as I mentioned before, we usually have about 2,500 people sign up to each one of our webinars. We just switched to a new platform, so we're all hoping that eventually we will be able to accommodate most of those people. Where it stands right now is we do, for the quality of the webinar recording, we do need to cap that the seats on actual webinar day at about 2,000, or just under 2,000, I believe. But essentially those first few minutes, we watch a lot of people come in the doors, the virtual doors, and we say hi to everybody and things like that. So then in the first 30 seconds before we actually launch the webinar and hit record, we do have 5 slides that we have added to the webinar that was submitted, or the slide deck template, or the slide deck that was submitted by the speaker, that are kind of boilerplate. So introducing the program, introducing the the team and introducing the upcoming webinar for the following month. And then we do a little bit of speaker introduction based on the short bio that was provided. And then we hit record, and then the speaker goes ahead and gives their webinar. Within the actual flow of the webinar, so there's a couple of ways, like there's many ways that the webinar itself can be structured, but essentially the speaker has about 60 minutes, oh, sorry, 40, you've confused me with the 90 minutes. I think we only have 45 minutes.
Yeah, you're right. So when I said 90 minutes, it included the 30 minutes before the webinar.
Okay.
And the webinar itself is 60 minutes. So yeah, so within the 60-minute webinar of the where the recording is on, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. So like you carry the 4. Okay. So so within the webinar, speakers can choose to kind of do the Q&A portion a number of different ways, and this is depending on whether people like to jump between the Q&A screen, or they just want to present their slides and then do Q&A at the end. And different speakers like to do and handle Q&A different ways. Different people are comfortable doing it different ways. Some people like to ask specific questions. Some people like to, hop into the chat box and, see what's happening. And it's really, however the speaker is comfortable. And we as the webinar team, we will help support whatever they want to do as best we can by, copy pasting that Q&A box and making sure they have the questions that they need kind of lined up so it makes it easier for them. And so so what most speakers will do is they'll do about a 40-minute presentation, and then they'll do about 20 minutes of Q&A at the end. Other speakers will break it up a little bit more. So, they'll do, 20 minutes of talking, 10 minutes of questions, 20 minutes of talking, and 10 at the end. So it kind of varies per speaker, but they'll balance it out kind of their own way. And some people will really hop in and out and answer questions the whole time. So yeah, but it's 60 minutes to play with, and you can do with that as you like, and we're here to help you.
Sure. Since I threw a curveball by mentioning 90 minutes, I'll just recap.
90 minutes? Is it really that long?
I'll just recap the time window and the breakdown. So the webinar itself is 60 minutes, broken down into about 45 minutes of speaker presented content and 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A at the back end. Before the webinar, the 30 minutes that made up the 90-minute total is broken down into the 15 minutes where the doors are open and audience is flooding in and we're interacting with the audience, and it also gives an opportunity for the audience to network amongst themselves. What I've found over years is that people use this opportunity even so that they come to know each other well. And we have very steady audience too. Some people very consistently come to these webinars. Mm-hmm. And then before the doors open up, we have another 10, 15 minutes where we do all the testing to make sure technically everything is still working on the day off as it was tested before. So did I summarize it right? And so that I can remove the confusion that I created.
Yeah, very concise. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's great. These are awesome tips and tricks that you've suggested. Any other last minute ideas, wisdom you have? I am certainly fortunate to have you as a partner, and I've learned so much from you in terms of how to take a process and make it a complete science industrialized way of doing it so that somebody else can actually be trained to do this. Any other pieces of wisdom that you have for either the speakers or for people that want to have these kind of webinar series?
Such kind words, Nick. I'm blushing. Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I would only say don't be afraid of the process. It's really really simple. And so if you have an idea, if you have an experience that you would like to share, we're definitely here to support you and to really help you throughout the steps to really to get the message out there. And don't be afraid of the 60 minutes. It goes by really really quickly, and we have a really involved audience. So just like Nick said, our people come back again and again and again, and I think we all really enjoy this program. We really enjoy our speakers. We really enjoy what everybody has to say, and our audience really loves to contribute. And so I say this to speakers all the time: you won't find yourself asking a question and be left hanging. So don't worry about that part. Just share what you have to share, and you'll really find the feedback comes from both ways. So.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, for taking the time and sharing your wisdom. We really appreciate it. Since spring is almost here, are you planning to come back to Canada sometime soon because the winter is getting done?
I will probably be back for mud season. Yep. When the tobogganing gets bad.
All right. Well, enjoy your time in France, and we'll catch up with you again when you're back here in Canada.
All right. Thanks,
All right.
Nick.
Thanks a lot. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.